welcome to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Szeltner in our Washington, D.C. studio. It is good to have you here. Pro-lifers call for a new reconciliation bill to defund Planned Parenthood after the vote was pulled for the American Health Care Act. The health care bill, which was designed to repeal and replace the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare, did not have enough support in the House of Representatives. It would have defunded Planned Parenthood for 1 year. Pro-lifers now want Congress to enact a new reconciliation bill to redirect taxpayer funding away from the abortion giant to community health centers. We'll be joined with one of those pro-life leaders, Marjorie Dannenfelser of the Susan B. Anthony list, in just a moment. But first, an interview with a member of the House Freedom Caucus, the group of Republican congressmen who opposed the health care bill. Before the bill was pulled last week, I spoke with Republican Representative Andy Harris of Maryland. In addition to being in the House Freedom Caucus, he is also a Catholic and a medical doctor. I asked the congressman if he thought defunding Planned Parenthood is important in healthcare legislation.
Oh, it's an idea whose time has come. Pretty clearly, the American public doesn't want their tax dollars flowing to institutions that do abortions, and Planned Parenthood is, of course, the largest abortion provider in the United States. And it's about time that we take that funding that went to that abortion provider and actually distributed it to the community health centers. In my district, there are 10 times as many community health centers as Planned Parenthood clinics, so that women are actually going to have far more access to the exact same services, with the exception of abortion, that they had with Planned Parenthood, and more comprehensive services as well.
That goes to my next question. Many say defunding Planned Parenthood would hurt women's health. Did you find anything in your congressional investigation that would prove otherwise?
Well, certainly the idea that Planned Parenthood was in collusion with middlemen who bought and sold baby body parts is something that I think most Americans find they're resentful of that. So clearly, the American public has spoken loudly that taxpayer dollars should not flow to abortion providers. Again, the community health centers offer comprehensive care. They offer mammograms, they offer prenatal visits, they offer things that Planned Parenthood just doesn't offer women. So if what we're really concerned about is providing comprehensive health care to women, it's not found at a Planned Parenthood clinic. The only thing you find there you don't find elsewhere is abortion. Everything else and much more can be found in a community health center.
What are Republicans doing to ensure that ultimately taxpayer dollars do not go to fund abortion on demand?
Well, that was the problem with the initial Obamacare bill, that there were no protections in the law that disallowed taxpayer funds going to plans that covered abortion. We think that's a mistake that shouldn't be repeated when we do the replacement. So we think what we're going to need is we probably need other protections. We probably need a much more thorough Hyde Amendment protection, for instance, that would cover all public funds, taxpayer funds that flow through to insurance plans. So, for instance, the tax credits, which could be used to buy policies, we think there should be Hyde protections for that. For the health savings accounts that people are allowed under the tax code with the new plan, we think there should be Hyde protections.
Congressman, you are Catholic. Does your Catholic faith influence your work as a legislator, specifically when it comes to life?
Absolutely. I think that the NIH should have a firm restriction against funding embryonic stem cell research. I think we should be looking at what are called the human-animal chimeras, where we're taking human genes and putting them into animals. I mean, I think we should basically not be funding that kind of research until we know exactly what the ethical boundaries are. It informs my decisions when we look at something as simple as taxpayer funding of abortion. The majority of Americans oppose it. We shouldn't have public funding, public taxpayer funding of it.
Representative Andy Harris, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
For a reaction and to help us make sense of the latest pro-life news, we are joined by Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony list. Thank you for being here.
Thanks. I love being here with you, Catherine.
Marjorie, you are calling for a new reconciliation bill.
Yes.
Why is this the best way to defund Planned Parenthood?
Well, it takes just 50 votes in the Senate. Otherwise, you got to get to 60 because they would definitely, there would be a filibuster in the Senate. So it is the surest and easiest route. Nothing is easy in politics, however, so it's a little bit of a rough ride right now, but it is definitely the best route.
Are there other strategies?
Sure, there are some strategies. I mean, you could go state by state, of course, assuming that we do what we need to do on the federal level to allow that. You could also defund through a continuing resolution, which is basically continuing funding of the federal government for a whole another year without having to vote on individual votes. The problem with that, once again, however, is that 60-vote threshold that you need to combat a filibuster. So it really is the best strategy. We've been through it once in a practice round in 2015, and so we're right in the middle of that right now.
It's at the tip of our fingertips, it seems. So as Congressman Harris stated in that interview, he wants to defund Planned Parenthood. Now, he is a member of the House Freedom Caucus, which opposed the health care bill. Is there disunity among House Republicans on the pro-life issue?
You know, there's not disunity on the Planned Parenthood issue. Without question, the Freedom Caucus, the Speaker of the House, the Leader of the Senate, the White House are all for defunding Planned Parenthood. This is a unique moment in human history.
Yes.
What there is disagreement about is how Obamacare should be overturned, what should be in it. And so, unfortunately, the Planned Parenthood piece of this, which is vital, has been used, I believe, as sort of a political football back and forth. And that simply cannot be. It cannot be that the pro-life movement would ever be an extension of some other entity that has rights that are involved that we care about, but nothing as fundamental as the right to life.
I think that's why there's so much frustration and a lot of confusion. If pro-lifers do have majority, how could this be happening?
Well, because as usual, it's not neat. There's a crooked path to success, and I really do believe that we, regardless of what you might be hearing, there is still an open door for this to be passed by that 51-vote margin, but I believe it is a moment in the next 2 weeks where people are really going to have to let their voices be known and say there are no excuses for failing to get this done now.
This is a critical time. Now, President Trump has been tweeting about Planned Parenthood. Here's one example about the health care bill. The irony is that the Freedom Caucus, which is very pro-life and against Planned Parenthood, allows PP to continue if they stop this plan. It seems President Trump is trying to use some pro-life pressure. What do you make of that strategy?
He is indeed. He knows that there's unity on this issue, which is a beautiful thing, but he's using it, that unity on the issue, to try to get folks to come around to his perspective on what the health care bill should look like. I understand why one would do that. However, I think that the Planned Parenthood issue stands or falls on its own merits. It's a winning issue. Ironically, as controversial it has been in the history of the United States, it's far less controversial than the health care bill right now. And so we don't want to be used in order to advance a set of issues that aren't our primary focus.
Right, and we'll continue to monitor this. As you said, it's a really crucial, unique time. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the Susan B. Anthony List. The Senate vote to confirm Judge Neil Gorsuch to the Supreme Court is this upcoming Friday. He is President Trump's pick to replace the late Justice Antonin Scalia. Judge Gorsuch has a record of upholding religious liberty and has written about the value of life. If you believe he should be confirmed to the Supreme Court, make your voice heard by following this week's call to action. Here is how you can make a difference. Go to sba-list.org/court. You can send a message to your senators to confirm Judge Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. It's a simple step. Just submit your information and your message will be sent. If you believe it is time the High Court upholds the constitutional right to life, let your senators know. Make your voice heard. Go to sba-list.org/court. Now is the time to send in your message before the Senate votes on Friday. In more pro-life news, a former medical director for Planned Parenthood Arizona is caught on tape describing how to deliver babies intact during late-term abortions, reportedly in order to harvest body parts.
It's not a matter of how I feel about it coming out intact, but I got to worry about my staff and people's feelings about it coming out looking like a baby.
The newly released video features Dr. Deshaun Taylor and is the latest in a series of undercover videos obtained by the Center for Medical Progress. The video was released just hours after 15 felony charges were announced against David Daleiden, the man behind the undercover videos. We will have more on this in an interview with David Daleiden himself next week. Utah will require doctors to inform women medication-induced abortions can be halted after taking just one of 2 pills. Utah's Republican Governor Gary Herbert signed this legislation into law. Proponents say doctors can give a woman the hormone progesterone to stop an abortion after she's taken the first of 2 medications needed to complete the abortion. A sex selection abortion ban receives final passage from the Arkansas House. The ban would impose fines and prison time on doctors who perform abortions based solely on whether the mother wants to have a boy or a girl. If the ban becomes law, doctors who violate it could face up to a year in prison and up to a $2,500 fine. Women who receive or attempt to receive an abortion based solely on the baby's sex would not face any charges. An assisted suicide bill in Hawaii is delayed and likely defeated this session. The measure would allow adults with a terminal illness to get a prescription drug to end their own life. According to Hawaii News Now, state lawmakers said the bill is poorly written and needs considerable changes. March is Women's History Month, a time set aside to celebrate the vital role of women in American history. But like many other events that include women in the title, it's an observance frequently co-opted by abortion lobbyists who claim that to be pro-woman is to be pro-abortion. What's often not discussed is how the early feminists were ardently pro-life. We turn to an expert now who knows the issue well. Carol Crost is president of the board for the Susan B. Anthony Birthplace Museum. Carol, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you.
So earlier this month on International Women's Day, there was a Day Without a Woman protest. Is that something Susan B. Anthony would have participated in?
Well, I think Susan would have mixed, she was very tolerant. She believed that everybody should be welcome. I'm not sure that they would have welcomed her, however. She was opposed to abortion, and she was outspoken in that position. Her newspaper, The Revolution, was published in the latter half of the 1860s, and that coincided with Madame Restel and her many appearances and her notoriety in the newspapers. So because of that, her newspaper covered a great deal of information on abortion and the opposition to it.
Didn't she have a policy she would not allow abortion to be advertised in her newspaper?
Exactly,
Really?
exactly. Her inaugural edition stated that she would not advertise for quack and immoral medicines, and also that she opposed standing armies. So she was sort of our first consistent life ethic person. And that inaugural policy was actually explained in the newspaper over 20 times in the short period of the span of the life of that paper.
Trying to send a clear message there. In addition to Susan B. Anthony, who were other early feminists who were also pro-life?
Well, there's not a known suffragist that expressed support for abortion. They were unanimous and vociferous in their opposition to abortion. They saw abortion as an offense, a violence to women, sort of a rape of the womb. They, just had struggled with the middle of the 19th century with slavery, and they were just coming on the end of the emancipation of the slaves. And so, as Elizabeth Cady Stanton said, when we consider that we have been treated as property, it is degrading to us to treat our children as property to destroy as we see fit. And Elizabeth Cady Stanton, of course, was the editor of Susan B. Anthony's newspaper.
Which goes to my next question. There is this narrative, this idea today that the rights women are fighting for today are reproductive rights, aka access to abortion and contraception. Does that fit in with the same idea of womanhood as the early feminists?
Well, interestingly, they pretty much opposed contraception and abortion. And they did that for a number of reasons, but the primary one was not only because abortion took the life of a child. They were very explicit in their language. They interchanged infanticide, feticide, crimes against humanity, child murder. They believed that contraception and abortion actually encouraged promiscuity among men. And so their way of voluntarily controlling their motherhood to a certain extent was through their activism in the temperance movement. They felt that men needed to temper their consumption of liquor, and that in turn would allow women to have more control in the family. It's interesting that they believed that motherhood was one of their greatest gifts. They believed to some extent that they wanted to bring men up to the level of women. They wanted to take the men out of the bars, bring them into the homes, and have them participate in nurturing in the family. So what we're finding today is that this is kind of a reversal of what's happening today. And I think about what Fulton J. Sheen said, that the level of civilization depends upon its womanhood. And that is very clear in the way that the suffragists felt. Elizabeth Cady Stanton believed that women were more equal than men because of their maternity.
Carol Crossed, a message for pro-lifers to hear today from our early feminists. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you.
When we come back, former Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina reveals the personal reasons she is pro-life. Stay tuned as EWTN Pro-Life Weekly continues after this break.
And you say, well, why are you talking so much about life? Because I want other people to live. That's why. It's a teaching of the Lord that God alone gives life and God alone takes life.
That's EWTN foundress Mother Angelica talking about being pro-life back in 1994. We keep Mother close in our prayers this week as it marks 1 year since her death. Welcome back to EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. I'm Catherine Szeltner. This week we are speaking out against new YouTube videos Planned Parenthood claims are supposed to make women feel better about getting an abortion. Planned Parenthood claims these videos explain what really happens with two types of abortion procedures, the abortion pill and an in-clinic abortion. The animated drawings and upbeat music quickly brush over the methods in 3 minutes or less. And what's unfortunately no surprise, Teen Vogue is promoting the videos with an article, Planned Parenthood Videos Explain Abortion Process. The piece reads like a press release for Planned Parenthood, following its talking points almost word for word. There is a whole lot missing in these videos, including an accurate portrayal of an unborn baby. With the help of science, we know an increasing amount about the preborn. Around 6 weeks, brain waves are detectable and fingers begin to form. By week 7, eyelids and toes form. So how is the unborn depicted in this Planned Parenthood animation? As a dot, a white dot. That is dehumanizing and far from educational. What's also missing is the long list of health risks a woman faces if she gets an abortion. According to the National Right to Life, some of those risks include hemorrhaging, ectopic pregnancy, sterility, and death. We recommend heading over to Live Action's YouTube page for accurate videos about abortion. Former abortionist Dr. Anthony Levantino explains first, second, and third trimester abortion procedures and then answers common questions. Unlike what Planned Parenthood's YouTube videos would have you believe, it will take more than a hot shower and a few hours rest to recover from an abortion. It is a serious procedure in which a child is lost. The upbeat music, calm narrative voice, and animated drawings cannot disguise that tragedy. If you have gotten an abortion and are looking for healing, go to hopeafterabortion.com. Remember, there is something you, our viewers, can do to combat today's culture of death. Our call to action is to tell your senators to confirm Judge Gorsuch to the Supreme Court. Go to sba-list.org/court. Former Republican presidential candidate Carly Fiorina rose in the primary polls following her strong pro-life debate performances. How did the former Hewlett-Packard CEO come to be so outspoken on the life issue? In our pro-life focus this week, Carly Fiorina opens up in a new personal way about her journey to the pro-life cause. Carly Fiorina, thank you for taking the time to speak with us today.
My pleasure.
You are not shy in sharing your pro-life views. How did you come to be so passionate about this issue?
Well, you know, it was experience, a whole set of experiences. First, perhaps, was an experience I had in my early 20s, right here in Washington, D.C., actually. I had a very good friend who decided she was going to have an abortion. And despite my talking with her, she was adamant about this. And so we went to a Planned Parenthood clinic. I observed that she was given no options. There was no conversation about whether or not this was the right thing for her and what her other alternatives might be. It was a callous experience, and I saw the impact of that abortion on her, not just physically, but emotionally and especially spiritually. Honestly, she was never the same since. I met my husband a couple years later, and when I married him, I learned that his mother had been told to abort him. She had him quite late in her life. She had a great deal of difficulty with her previous pregnancies, and so her doctor told her life was in danger and she should abort her unborn child. She refused. She was a brave and faithful woman. She spent a year in the hospital after his birth. But I've thought often about how different her life would have been, how different my life would have been had he not been brought into the world. I learned I couldn't have children of my own later, so I understand that life is a precious gift. And then on top of all of that personal experience, science is proving us right.
A vast majority of babies who are diagnosed with disabilities or special needs are aborted in the womb. You, Carly, after high school, volunteered at a high school for children with special needs. What kind of impact did that have on you?
I volunteered in a school for children that were severely disabled in some way, whether it was physical disabilities or mental challenges. Every single one of these children was gifted by God. And I can remember in particular a little boy who had so many challenges, and yet joy radiated out of this child.
Every life has value.
That's right.
Carly, you have battled and you have beaten cancer. Can you share more with us about that specific time in your life?
Well, anyone who hears the word cancer about themselves from a doctor experiences this moment of, or maybe many moments, but when you first hear that word, it's sheer terror. You know, it's a word that terrifies us. I would not wish cancer on anyone. Having said that, and having survived it, I can say now that cancer was a blessing in some ways. It was a blessing because it reaffirmed my faith. I relied on my faith, and my faith didn't let me down. It strengthened my family. You know what love really is when you're in a very difficult situation, not when you're in an easy situation. And it was a blessing as well because I experienced the kindness of so many strangers. Again, I wouldn't wish it on anyone, but when you have an experience that starts out as terrifying and you end up getting through it, and at the end of it all, your faith is stronger, your family is stronger, and your belief in your fellow human being is stronger, that's a blessing.
Planned Parenthood supporters say defunding the abortion giant would prevent more women from getting breast exams and from detecting cancer. This is an issue that's obviously very close to you. So how do you respond to those claims?
Well, first of all, of course, it's untrue. It's a lie. Planned Parenthood doesn't provide mammograms. They provide references for mammograms, but so do pregnancy centers, community health centers. There are all kinds of centers available for women, most of which are not funded by taxpayers, actually, although they are funded frequently by the generosity of donors, that can provide a woman access to the holistic health care that she needs, including mammograms. There is no reason that a woman cannot have access to a mammogram. We don't need Planned Parenthood to provide that. I served for a period of time on the board of the GW Hospital in Washington, D.C. And just as one example, this is a hospital that has a tremendous program of outreach to the community. African American women are more subject to breast cancer than are Anglo women. We're not sure we understand this, but GW took it upon themselves to make sure that they have mobile mammograms that move into communities here in Washington, D.C. and make available to women on their, literally on their street corner in their neighborhoods, screening. So this is a myth that Planned Parenthood puts forward, but obviously it's a myth that has a big impact because we all want women to have access to early detection, which is the key to survival in cancer.
Carly, Fiorina, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
That's it for this edition of EWTN Pro-Life Weekly. You can reach us anytime with questions, ideas, comments at prolifeweekly@ewtn.com. I look forward to seeing you here again next week. Life is a gift. God bless.